There's a mathematical inevitability to empire collapse that nobody talks about. It's not about corruption, it's not about moral decay, it's not even about military defeat. Every empire, without exception, ends the same way, drowning in unpayable debt. And once I understood why, I realized the United States is following the exact same mathematical progression. That destroyed Rome, Spain, Britain, and the Soviet Union. This isn't politics, this is arithmetic. And the numbers say we're already past the point of no return.
Gentlemen, we have reached it. The point of no return. Our debt trajectory has exceeded the sustainability threshold.
And for 76 AD, Rome collapsed under the weight of debt it couldn't service. In 1557, Spain, the richest empire in history, declared its first bankruptcy. In 1945, Britain emerged victorious from World War II, but economically destroyed, owing more than its entire GDP. In 1991, the Soviet Union ceased to exist because it ran out of money for empires. For different centuries, for different political systems, one ending, unpayable debt leading to collapse. And here's what should terrify you. The United States currently owes $36 trillion. That's 120% of GDP. We're spending more on interest payments than on our entire military. And we're adding another trillion in debt every 100 days. We're not approaching the debt trap. We're already in it. Let me show you why this always happens, why it's mathematical, and why no empire in history has ever escaped once they reach where we are now. Every empire starts the same way. They win, they conquer territory, defeat rivals, establish dominance, and this victory creates prosperity. Trade expands, wealth flows in, the economy booms, the people are happy, the empire feels invincible. This is what I call the prosperity trap, because this success creates three fatal assumptions that every empire makes. Assumption 1. The good times are permanent. When wealth is flowing in, empires believe it will continue forever. Rome thought the conquered territories would always pay tribute. Spain thought the silver mines would never run dry. Britain thought the colonies would always generate wealth. The Soviet Union thought central planning had solved economic problems forever. They were all wrong. Assumption 2. Military power guarantees economic power. Empires believe that as long as they're militarily dominant, wealth will follow, so they expand the military. They build more bases, they take on more commitments, they fight more wars, and they assume the economy can support it indefinitely. It can't. Assumption 3. Borrowing today is free because tomorrow is richer. When an empire is growing, debt seems smart. Why not borrow against future prosperity? The economy is expanding. Tax revenues are rising. That debt will be easy to pay back later, except the growth doesn't last. And the debt does. These three assumptions are why every empire follows the same path. Let me show you exactly how the math plays out. Stage 2. The expansion spiral. Once an empire feels secure, it expands, not because it needs to, but because it can. And this is where the mathematics of empire collapse begins. Rome, after defeating Carthage. Rome expanded for 400 years. At its peak, Roman legions defended 5,000 miles of frontier. 30 legions, 150,000 soldiers, plus auxiliaries. The cost was astronomical. By the 3rd century, military spending consumed 75% of the Roman budget. Spain, after conquering the Americas. Spain built a global empire. By 1580, Spanish troops were fighting simultaneously on 4 continents, against the Ottomans, against Protestant rebels, against England, against France. The military budget exploded. By 1600, Spain was spending 10 million ducats annually on military, more than all revenue combined. Britain, after defeating Napoleon, Britain built the largest empire in history. By 1900, they had to defend territory on 6 continents for 100 million subjects. Then came World War I, $40 billion in costs. Then World War II, another $120 billion. The empire was militarily successful, but economically destroyed. Soviet Union, after World War II. The USSR matched America militarily, despite having 1/3 the GDP. 15 to 20% of the entire Soviet economy went to defense. They had to counter America everywhere. Afghanistan, Cuba, Vietnam, Syria. The cost was unsustainable from day one. United States. Today, America has over 750 military bases in 80 countries. We have troops in 150 countries. We're committed to defending Europe through NATO, defending Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, countering China, countering Russia, fighting in the Middle East. Our military budget is $850 billion annually, more than the next 10 countries combined. And here's the thing, it's not enough. We're stretched thin, equipment is aging, recruitment is down. We have commitments we can't actually fulfill. This is the expansion spiral. Military commitments grow faster than the economy can support them, but empires can't admit this, because admitting it means admitting weakness, so instead, they borrow. When military spending exceeds revenue, empires face a choice: cut spending and look weak, or find more money. They always choose more money. And the fastest way to get more money is to debase the currency. Rome, in 64 AD, Nero reduced the silver content of the denarius from 95% to 90%. It seemed harmless. 5% less silver, same face value, instant 5% profit for the government. So they kept doing it. By 100 AD, the denarius was 80% silver. By 100 AD, 50% silver. By 70 AD, only 5% silver. A coin that had been nearly pure silver for centuries became copper-coated with silver paint. What happened? Inflation exploded. In 100 AD, a pound of gold bought 7 to 2,000 denarii. By 300 AD, the same pound of gold cost 2 million denarii. The Roman currency collapsed. Soldiers refused to accept denarii as payment. Merchants demanded payment in gold or goods. The monetary system failed. Spain did the same thing. They started mixing copper into silver. Coins. A piece of 8 that was supposed to be pure silver became 50% copper, then 75% copper, then almost entirely copper with silver coating. By 1600, Spanish silver coins contained barely any silver. Prices in Spain increased 400% in 50 years. Merchants throughout Europe stopped accepting Spanish currency at face value. The reserve currency of the world became worthless metal. Britain abandoned the gold standard in 1931. The pound, which had been backed by gold for over 100 years, became pure fiat currency. It immediately lost 25% of its value. By 1945, Britain was printing money to pay war debts. The global reserve currency was debasing itself in real time. The pound kept falling. In 1940, 1 pound equaled $4.03. By 1950, to $0.80. By 1970, to $0.40. Today, $1.27. The reserve currency of the 19th century became a regional currency in 1971. Nixon closed the gold window. The dollar, which had been backed by gold since 1792, became pure fiat currency. Since 2000, the money supply has increased 400%. Since 2020, we've printed over $6 trillion. We're not mixing copper into silver coins. We're just pressing buttons and creating trillions of dollars out of nothing. The mechanism is different. The math is the same. More currency units chasing the same amount of goods. The dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power since 1971. This is stage 3, and it accelerates stage 4. Here's where the mathematics becomes inescapable. Once an empire starts debasing currency and borrowing heavily, they enter what I call the debt-death spiral. This is the point of no return. The math works like this. Step 1. Empire borrows to fund military expansion and maintain prosperity. Step 2. Currency debasement causes inflation. Step 3. Inflation requires more currency to pay the same debts. Step 4. More currency printing causes more inflation. Step 5. Creditors demand higher interest rates to compensate for inflation. Step 6. Higher interest rates mean more borrowing just to pay interest on existing debt. Step 7. More borrowing requires more currency printing. Step 8. More printing causes more inflation, and the cycle repeats faster each time until the system collapses. Let me show you this with real numbers. Spain declared bankruptcy 4 times in 40 years: 1557, 1560, 1575, 1596. Each time, they defaulted on debts, restructured with creditors, and promised reforms. Each time, they immediately borrowed more money to pay military costs. By 1596, Spain's debt service consumed more than half of all revenue. They were borrowing money just to pay interest on previous loans. The spiral was complete. Within 20 years, Spain was economically finished. After World War I, Britain owed $40 billion. They borrowed throughout the 1920s and 1930s to service this debt. Then World War II added another $120 billion. By 1945, Britain owed more than 150% of GDP. Interest payments consumed 40% of government revenue. They couldn't pay it. They couldn't grow fast enough to outrun it. The only solution was to print money, which caused inflation, which required more money printing. By 1960, Britain was trapped in the spiral. By 1970, the empire was gone. The USSR wasn't borrowing from Western banks, but they had the same mathematical problem. Military spending exceeded sustainable levels. Economic growth had stopped. Oil revenue, their only real money, dropped in 1985. By 1989, the Soviet government couldn't pay salaries, couldn't fund the military, couldn't maintain basic services. They tried printing rubles, but the ruble was already worthless internationally. There was no way out. The math had caught up. In 1991, it was over. The United States currently owes $36 trillion. Last year, we paid $180 billion just in interest. This year, we'll pay over $1 trillion in interest, more than we spent on defense. We ran a $1.8 trillion deficit last year. During peacetime, in a growing economy, we're borrowing $1.8 trillion just to keep the government running and pay interest on previous debt. Here's the math that should terrify you. Our average interest rate on government debt is around 3%. If that rises to 5%, which is historically normal, interest payments alone will exceed $1.80 trillion annually. That's more than we collect in all income taxes combined. We would be borrowing more than $1 trillion per year just to pay interest. That's the debt-death spiral, and we're already in it. Here's the part that makes the debt spiral terminal. Empires that rely on borrowing and currency debasement stop producing. When you can just print money or borrow from the future, why build things? Why innovate? Why manufacture? It's easier to import and consume. Spain controlled half the world's gold and silver. They had unlimited money, so they stopped producing. Agriculture declined. Manufacturing disappeared. Spanish nobility considered work beneath them. They imported everything: French wine, Italian silk, Dutch goods, British ships. All the silver that came from the Americas went straight back out to pay for imports. Spain became a conduit of wealth, flowed through them, but none of it stayed. By 1650, Spain produced almost nothing. When the silver mines depleted, the entire economy collapsed. They had nothing to fall back on. Britain's manufacturing base never recovered from World War I. By the 1960s, shipbuilding, steel, textiles, all the industries that made Britain the workshop of the world were gone. They became a service economy, a financial hub, but you can't sustain an empire on banking alone. When the manufacturing base disappeared, so did the economic foundation. The empire lasted another decade out of momentum, then vanished. Soviet productivity collapsed in the 1970s. Factories produced junk. Farms failed despite excellent land. Technology fell decades behind the West. Why? Because central planning removes all incentive to innovate or produce efficiently. By the 1980s, the USSR was importing grain. A country with some of the best farmland on earth couldn't feed itself. When oil revenue dropped, they had nothing else. No competitive industries, no productivity, no foundation. The whole system collapsed. America's manufacturing base has been gutted over the past 40 years. We don't make steel anymore. We don't make ships. We don't make electronics. We import $800 billion more than we export every year. We design things. We finance things. We consume things, but we don't produce things. The percentage of GDP from manufacturing has dropped from 25% in 1970 to 11% today. We're dependent on foreign supply chains for everything: medicine, electronics, rare earth metals, even military components. Just like Spain with their silver, we're using borrowed dollars to import everything. We consume, others produce, and when the dollar stops being universally accepted, we're in trouble. Here's why this always ends in collapse. Here's the math that nobody can escape. The empire equation: military spending greater than economic growth. Currency debasement gives inflation. Inflation plus debt gives higher interest rates. Higher interest gives more borrowing. More borrowing gives more printing. More printing gives less productivity. Less productivity gives slower growth. Slower growth gives military spending greater than economic growth. It's a loop. Once you enter the spiral, every solution makes the problem worse. Cut military spending. Rivals expand. The empire contracts. Revenue falls. Debt becomes harder to service. Raise taxes. Productive citizens leave. Economic growth slows. Revenue actually falls. Print more money. Inflation accelerates. Interest rates rise. Debt costs increase. Default on debt. Credit disappears. Can't borrow anymore. Government can't function. Military can't be paid. Collapse is immediate. There's no mathematical way out. That's why every empire that enters this stage collapses. Not because they're stupid. Not because they're corrupt. Because the math is inescapable. I know what you're thinking. America is different. We have the dollar. We have technology. We have the strongest military. We have the best economy. That's what they all thought. Rome thought their military was unbeatable. The legions had conquered the known world. They thought their engineering and roads and aqueducts made them advance beyond any rival. They thought their political system was superior. They were wrong. Spain thought controlling half the world, gold and silver, made them financially invincible. How can an empire with unlimited money ever fail? They thought their galleons and conquistadors made them untouchable. They were wrong. Britain thought the empire on which the sun never set was permanent. They thought the Royal Navy guaranteed dominance. They thought the pound sterling would always be the reserve currency. They were wrong. The Soviet Union thought nuclear weapons and communist ideology made them immune to economic laws. They thought central planning was scientifically superior to markets. They thought they would bury capitalism. They were wrong. America thinks the dollar's reserve currency status, our military superiority, and our technological edge make us different. We're wrong. The math doesn't care about exceptionalism. The debt spiral doesn't care about ideology. The pattern doesn't care about military strength. $36 trillion in debt, $1 trillion annual interest payments, $1.8 trillion annual deficits, 120% debt to GDP, declining manufacturing, crumbling infrastructure, failing institutions. We're not approaching the crisis, we're in it. We've completed every stage that precedes collapse. Military overextension, currency debasement, debt spiral, productivity decline. There's one stage left, the collapse itself. The question isn't if. The math says it's inevitable. The question is when. Rome took 100 years to fully collapse after entering the debt spiral. Spain took 100 years. Britain took 50 years. The Soviet Union took less than 3 years once the acceleration began. Each collapse happened faster than the last. Why? Because the modern world moves faster. Information moves faster. Money moves faster. Crisis spreads faster. Rome collapsed slowly because ancient economies moved slowly. Spain took a century because sailing ships and horse-drawn carriages limited the speed of economic contagion. Britain collapsed in decades because telegraphs and steamships accelerated everything. The Soviet Union imploded in less than 1,000 days because modern communication and global markets spread crisis instantly. America will collapse faster than any of them. When the dollar loses reserve currency status, when central banks stop holding dollars, when oil isn't priced in dollars, when international trade moves to other currencies, the collapse will be sudden. We won't see it coming because we're not looking for it. We're telling ourselves the same stories every empire tells itself. We're different. This time is special. The rules don't apply to us. We'll figure it out. But the math says otherwise. And math always wins. Ferdinand Pecora, the Senate investigator who examined the causes of the Great Depression, said something in 1933 that applies today. When a nation's leaders believe themselves above economic laws, they discover those laws still apply, usually at the worst possible moment. Every empire believes they've transcended basic economic reality. Every empire believes debt. Doesn't matter if you're powerful enough. Every empire believes they can print money and borrow forever without consequences. Every empire is wrong. The signs are everywhere. China and Russia trading in yuan and rubles. Saudi Arabia accepting yuan for oil. BRICS nations developing alternative payment systems. Central banks buying gold at record rates. The dollar's share of global reserves falling from 70% to 58% in 20 years. The world is slowly, carefully, deliberately moving away from the dollar. Not because they want to hurt America. Because they see what we refuse to see. We're following the pattern. We're in the debt spiral. We're approaching collapse, and we're doing nothing to stop it. When the collapse comes, and it will come, it won't be gradual. It will be sudden. A currency crisis that triggers a debt crisis that triggers a political crisis overnight. The superpower becomes a cautionary tale. The reserve currency becomes a regional currency. The empire becomes a memory. Maybe we have 10 years, maybe 5, maybe less. The Soviet Union went from superpower to non-existent in 900 days. Britain lost its empire in 20 years. Spain took longer. But the pattern was the same. 3 empires followed this path to collapse. Rome followed it. Spain followed it. Britain followed it. The Soviet Union followed it. Now it's our turn. The math doesn't lie. The pattern doesn't break. History doesn't stop repeating just because we think we're special. I finally figured out why every empire ends in debt, because debt is the mathematical consequence of empire. You cannot maintain global dominance without spending more than you produce. You cannot spend more than you produce without borrowing. You cannot borrow forever without currency debasement. You cannot debase currency without inflation. You cannot inflate without destroying productivity. And you cannot destroy productivity without collapse. It's not corruption that kills empires, it's arithmetic. The United States has $36 trillion in debt and is adding more every single day. The spiral is accelerating. The endpoint is inevitable. We're not special. We're not different. We're just the next empire to learn that the math always wins.